everybody, welcome back to another episode of Tech Tuesday. Today I'm going to walk you through the OSD Toolkit. If you haven't used it, it's a really cool tool that helps you enable and configure BranchCache in your environment. I'll also include the Stifler integration. If you don't currently use Stifler, don't worry, you can still use the OSD Toolkit. This is a good video to follow along with if you're using it for the first time because I'm going to explain what it is and how you use it. It's also a really good video if you need some help with updating your boot images because now you're ready to deploy another version of Windows. So let's get right into it. The first thing that we want to talk about is the ADK. Since 1903 is out now, we do have a new ADK that we have to take into consideration as well. Technically, you could deploy 1903 with the 1809 WinPE components, for example, and in past releases where there were problems with the ADK, it was actually recommended to use the previous ADK until a fix came out. However, in general, you should be using the latest ADK for your deployments, meaning that if you're deploying 1903, then you are using the WinPE components for 1903 for those deployments. A quick walkthrough on how to update to the latest ADK. First of all, you want to make sure that you download two things at this point because the WinPE components have been broken out from the ADK itself. So you need to download the 1903 ADK as well as the 1903 WinPE components. Then you just simply uninstall the old ADK via Programs and Features in the control panel. You'll install the new ADK and the new WinPE components. You'll want to do a reboot and then you'll regenerate your config manager boot images. And that's what you'll use to create a OSD Toolkit boot image itself. And now for a little bit about the OSD Toolkit. It's a shiny community tool, meaning it's free, that you can use to enable BranchCache in WinPE, even for versions where it's not enabled. Hello, professional versions of Windows! As you probably know, BranchCache isn't supported by default in WinPE, and that's where the OSD Toolkit comes into the picture. Basically, we figured out a way to enable BranchCache so that your sequences will be able to download content from peers in the environment. And that's not all. By default, when you deploy a sequence in Config Manager, it's configured for download on demand, which means it's using HTTP download for your stuff. Windows 10 Professional doesn't peer content because it only uses bits. So, the OSD Toolkit sets everything to bits jobs, even download on demand jobs, so that you're always able to use BranchCache. Pretty freaking shiny if you ask me. If you're using the shiny OSD Toolkit, you also need to create a new boot image for use with your new 1903 deployments. It's recommended to have an OSD Toolkit integrated boot image that contains the same version of Windows PE, or lower if you're deploying older builds, as the version of Windows that you're deploying. This is due to the BranchCache database that gets created. The databases can always be upgraded, but they can't be downgraded. To simplify this with an extreme example, you're not going to be able to use Windows 7 WinPE source because the OS isn't going to understand the database and you'll lose your cache. Enough talk though, let's get into the demo. Let's walk through what you need to do to create a boot image that has the OSD Toolkit integrated with it. First things first, I made myself a temporary working directory. The next thing that I did was copy in the WinPE gen tool. As I said at the start of this video, I was integrating Stifler so that I could visualize my deployments. So I added in the Stifler client as well as the Stifler config. If you're actively updating your Stifler config, you want to make sure that you're adding it here and that you're regenerating a boot image. The next thing that you need to do is add in an Untouched Boot Wim. The easiest way to do that is to go into the Config Manager install directory under OSD Boot and grab the architecture of the boot image that you need. The next thing that I did was make a copy of that boot image that I put in here and I renamed it so that I'd know what ADK I was working with. Then I simply open a command window as an admin and I start in the directory that has the WinPE gen tool. Then it's just a few lines that help you create a boot image. Again, I'm integrating Stifler, so I've pointed to the location of my Stifler config. As you'll see, there is a little bit of work that goes on behind the scenes, and then you'll see us mount the image and then copy in our binaries. There's a lot of stuff that gets copied in and it goes pretty quick. Then you simply wait for all of the changes to be complete. And when you're done, you'll see that we successfully created a WinPE image with BranchCache in it. Now, I can just add this boot image into Config Manager. There's also a task sequence that you have to use as well. So I've opened one up so you can see what's going on the inside. This is a bare metal deployment. So I have a section that calls on the bits ACP, which is something that gets copied into the boot image, setting the BranchCache port It's extremely important to not use a default port of 80 because if you're using anything like Skype, BranchCache will break. It'll be very unhappy. I recommend using port 1337. Next thing I have to do is declare my BranchCache version. Since I am doing Windows 10 deployments, I want to make sure that I'm using version 2. I've enabled branch caching on battery because I love my laptops. And I've said, hey, anything that's in this cache has to live for 365 days. Next important step would be copying the bits ACP into the full OS, and then moving your BranchCache cache so that once these computers have deployed and they're out of WinPE and they're in full Windows, they can still serve content to any peers that are still in WinPE and are copying down your OS. And then, of course, I'm installing the Cypher client once I'm in the full OS. It's a really simple sequence, very, very shiny. I definitely recommend using it. Let's check in on a deployment. As you can see, I'm downloading a boot image with the OSD Toolkit. I'm getting about 95% from peers, and I'll see this number fluctuate a little bit. Everything actually looks really great. I would say that the peer-to-peer efficiency is extremely high. It might take a little bit longer to download the boot image, as in it's not going to go lightning quick, but I really like that I'm seeing that I'm getting content served from other peers. If you start to see this number drop a lot, then you know that the client is actually reaching out over the WAN to the distribution point to start downloading content. This may not be so great in an environment where you already have a lot of traffic, so I'm really happy with what I'm seeing right now. Now we've fast forwarded a little bit into the deployment and we're in WinPE. We're going to see something really interesting happening, and that's that it's actually going to start enabling and configuring BranchCache for use within WinPE. You have to remember, this isn't available natively. This is something that we are doing for you. Now that the download has started in this test sequence, we can see that the peer-to-peer efficiency is quite high because the transfer rate is growing astronomically. You can assume that if the transfer rate is growing, that means that the peer-to-peer efficiency is high. This means that the client has found other peers on the network that already has this content. When you see it start to drop, the client is looking for content from other peers and quite possibly falling back to the distribution point to download the content. The peer-to-peer efficiency rate is actually still pretty high, so I'm going to guess that the client is actually looking at other peers and not the first peer that it started its download from. Remember that BranchCache can download from multiple sources because the unit of currency is not the file, the unit of currency is the blocks of content itself. This is something that we've covered in other BranchCache videos. So this is actually really shiny. I'm really happy with what's going on in this environment. If you'd like to try out the OSD Toolkit in your environment, head on over to the 2Point Software website and go to Products OSD Toolkit. Here you'll find a page where you can read more information about what the OSD Toolkit does for you in your environment and sign up for it. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe. We come up with videos every Tuesday. You can follow me on Twitter at @arwoodmark, and you can follow 2Point Software at 2Point Software. And if you're going to MMS, we'll see you next week. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.